The knock didn't sound like a neighbor saying hello. It hammered like authority trying too hard. I set my coffee down on the porch rail and watched two HOA compliance officers. That's what the vest said. March up my gravel drive. Clipboards, radios, brand new tactical boots as if they were patrolling a war zone instead of a quiet cul-de-sac. They paused at the front steps, staring at the wood-beam farmhouse I'd spent the last year restoring. 10 acres of peaceful land, technically within the gated Oak Ridge community boundary, but only because the developers wanted the tax break of calling it ranch-style HOA luxury. I bought it precisely because it was the last private parcel with grandfathered rights. No architectural control, no forced landscaping, no nonsense. Or so I thought. The taller one cleared his throat. Mr. Ethan Cole? Depends. I adjusted my tool belt, still halfway through installing a hand-carved cedar mailbox post. You guys selling cookies? Because I only buy thin mints. Neither laughed. Figures. We're with the Oak Ridge Community Protection Unit, the shorter one announced, puffing up like a balloon when someone calls it important. We have orders from the HOA board. There it was. The board. Meaning her. Karen making house calls by proxy now? I asked. Again, blank looks. Humor. Wasted ammunition. This residence is in violation of community housing standards, the tall one said. You're being issued a relocation directive. I blinked. What now? You're required to vacate the premises within 48 hours, the short one said, practically beaming like he'd rehearsed the line in the mirror. The HOA board has voted that your dwelling is non-compliant with architectural cohesion standards. Proper forms filed. Decision final. I stared at them for a beat, then let out a slow whistle. 48 hours? That's supposed to scare me. It isn't a scare tactic, the tall guy said firmly. It's official enforcement. Failure to comply will result in fines, lien placement, and removal. Threat escalation by suburban soldiers. Classic Karen playbook. Boys, I said calmly, I was a sheriff in this county 8 years. I've read every property code since the Clinton administration. And you're standing on private land older than your HOA's bylaws. The board determined your grandfather clause is no longer applicable, the short one snapped. And I determined you're both confused, I replied. They exchanged glances, then stepped closer like they expected me to back down. The tall one put his hand on a holster. Pepper spray, but dramatic enough. Interesting choice. Escalation over paperwork. Karen had gotten bold. You refuse to comply, the short one declared, writing something furiously on his clipboard. We'll log this as active resistance. Do what you gotta do, I said, taking a slow sip of coffee. But while you're logging, go ahead and note that trespassing on private property is a Class B misdemeanor. That gave them half a second of hesitation. Half a second too late. A familiar rumble drifted down the road. A county sheriff cruiser rolled through the open ranch gate, gravel crunching under tires. Sun flashed off the badge on the door. The patrol car stopped behind the HOA golf cart they'd proudly driven in on. Deputy Ramirez stepped out, sunglasses on, jaw already set in that look cops get when they smell stupidity. Morning, Ethan. Morning, I replied casually. Coffee's fresh. He nodded, then turned his gaze to the two HOA patrol heroes. You gentlemen lost? This is official HOA enforcement, the short one started. Ramirez held up one hand. Let's stop that sentence right there. The taller man stiffened. We're here on board authority. Ramirez clicked his pen, leaning against his car. And I'm here on county authority, responding to a trespassing call placed by, funny enough, your HOA president's neighbor across the street who said you were harassing a homeowner. That neighbor would be Mrs. Hargrove, retired history teacher, binocular enthusiast, the only witness I ever needed. Bless her. The short officer swallowed. We weren't harassing. You issued an eviction directive, Ramirez said, which, in case nobody in your neighborhood seminars covered, you don't have power to do. HOA isn't law enforcement. Or the court. This land falls within. This land falls under county zoning with a grandparent exemption older than my career, Ramirez cut in. And I don't see a warrant, or probable cause, or a legal reason for you to be here. He crossed his arms. So here's how this works. You leave. Oh. Or I charge you with trespass and impersonating an officer. The tall one's jaw clenched. We're not impersonating. You have matching tactical vests labeled Community Protection Unit. You have radios. You issued a relocation order. You approached armed-trained property owners trying to assert authority you don't have. Ramirez tilted his chin toward me. That's impersonation. The shorter one sputtered. We report to the HOA president. Yeah, Ramirez said. And I report to the law. For a moment, the only sound was a hawk somewhere overhead riding the breeze. Then the tall one tugged the short one's sleeve. We'll verify with the board. You do that, Ramirez said. Off the property. They retreated, muttering about misunderstandings and board decisions. I watched them tear away fast in their electric golf cart like they were fleeing a bank robbery in a clown car. When they were gone, Ramirez removed his sunglasses. You settling in okay? I nodded. Was, until the local dictatorship tried annexing my land. He smirked. Word is the new HOA president hates that she can't tell you what color to paint your barn. Barn's fine. I worry about the day she demands I ask permission to breathe. Ramirez chuckled, then sobered. Just keep things clean legally. Karen's the type who likes to poke until someone snaps, so she can play victim. I don't break laws, I said. But you bend bullies, he replied. Fair. He handed me a card. Call me if they come back. Or skip the call and file directly with the county. That board's already on our radar. He drove off, dust hanging in the air like a curtain closing on Act 1. I picked my coffee back up, took a quiet sip, watched sunlight paint the fence line gold. You'd never know the HOA war drums were beating beneath the birdsong. But they were. Within minutes, my phone buzzed, unknown number, but I didn't need caller ID. This is Ethan. A voice dripping sugar and venom answered. Mr. Cole. Karen here. I understand you just interfered with HOA enforcement. Karen, I said warmly. Good morning. Your goons left their pride in my driveway. Want me to bag it for lost and found? Silence. Tight. Angry silence. You're not special, she said coldly. You may believe your veteran background entitles you to superiority, but you're just another resident under HOA policy. Wrong on 2 counts, I said. 1. I'm not under HOA policy. 2. Superiority isn't my thing. Legality is. You can fight this, she sneered, but you will lose. I always win. Good to know, I replied. That'll make the surprise more fun. She hung up. I looked across my land. The oak trees, the fields, the quiet freedom I earned. You don't survive military tours, sheriff shifts, and a lifetime of dealing with people who test your patience just to be bullied by a committee obsessed with mailbox paint codes. They picked the wrong ranch. And the wrong man. This wasn't a fight I asked for, but it was one I would finish. Smart, legal, clean. And when justice came, it would not be loud. It would be surgical. Ethan woke before sunrise, the farmhouse still breathing out last night's quiet. The knock had faded, but the idea of it lingered like a smear on glass. He moved through the kitchen on habit. Coffee, list, method, then sat at the workbench with a legal pad and a slow, cunning grin. Karen had brought a battalion of theatrics to his gate. He would return it with paperwork and light. Step 1. Understand the enemy. Step 2. Exploit every procedural weakness. He began with the HOA bylaws. The Oak Ridge packet lived in a laminated binder at the community office. Most people trusted the board to be reasonable because it was easier than reading 90 pages of fine print. Ethan didn't trust what he couldn't read. He drove into town with a thermos, a notebook, and the kind of patience that had kept men alive in worse places. At the office, the receptionist, tall, apologetic, offered the binder like it was a relic. Ethan flipped through the sections. Covenant clauses, architectural standards, enforcement mechanisms, voting thresholds. His eye snagged on the compliance and enforcement section. Any enforcement action required a formal notice, an opportunity to cure, and a hearing before a 3-member committee. Notices had to be personally served or delivered by certified mail. Emergency remedies were allowed only under immediate safety concerns. He circled phrases with a pen. No emergency. No certified notice. No hearing. A relocation directive, 48 hours, and the men had been in vests and radios, not carrying certified mail or court orders. Procedural violation piled on procedural violation like rotten shingles. He made copies. Outside, Deputy Ramirez's cruiser sat by the curb. Ethan waved him over. Ramirez, briefcase in hand, leaned across the hood and watched the pages Ethan spread out like a professional laying a map. Looks like they skipped the paperwork and hired costumes, Ethan said. Ramirez grinned. Karen's never been a fan of minutiae when it inconveniences her authority. She's got charm and pamphlets, little else. Can the county step in? Ethan asked. If they continue to impersonate and trespass, I want this on the record. Ramirez closed his briefcase with a professional click. File a complaint. Civil and criminal. From there, we'll see who wants to press charges. But if you want full leverage, make her public. Ethan thought of a lever that would break a rake across Karen's smug face without swinging. Public exposure. A procedural challenge unveiled in the daylight where neighbors could read it and judges could adjudicate. He started talking to neighbors. Not the kind who watched from behind lace curtains, but the practical ones. The handyman who'd replaced Ethan's fence post, the woman with a law degree turned freelance paralegal, the retired accountant who balanced the book club's books. Word spread like a friendly inspection. Quiet, precise, a subtle undercurrent that Karen's theatrics had consequences. By afternoon, Ethan had a small coalition. Mrs. Hargrove brought a notarized statement about the HOA patrol's behavior. The paralegal, Jenna, volunteered to review filings. The accountant, Nolan, dusted off a scanner and offered spreadsheets for fines the HOA had levied over the past 2 years. Patterns emerged. Fines assessed without hearing, payments accepted without documentation, special assessments voted at meetings with suspicious quorum counts. Little administrative shortcuts appeared more like a trail. Someone's been cooking the numbers, Nolan said, emphasizing the last syllable like it tasted of rust. Look at these vote tallies. When we asked for the meeting minutes, the board provided drafts, unedited, and signed. And some weeks the quorum numbers don't add. Forgery? Jenna asked, frowning. Or clerical error repeated enough times to look deliberate. Either way, it's evidence, Ethan said. We're not just angry neighbors. We're a record. He drafted a formal complaint. Procedural violations, impersonation, trespass, failure to follow enforcement protocol, and alleged fiduciary mismanagement. He walked it to the county clerk and filed with the registrar of deeds, an important place to lodge things that made HOA committees sweat. Karen responded the way bullies do when a mirror appears. Temper and theater. An email went out to Oak Ridge residents. Unauthorized harassment campaign launched against the board. Please remain calm. Karen signed it in an elegant script and copied the community's private forum where gossip and grievances simmered. Ethan knew the forum. It was a soft belly of the neighborhood, where complaints were whispered as tea-time gossip and membership felt like belonging. He posted a matter-of-fact account. The events at his gate, the absence of certified notice, the deputy's response. He attached the binder pages he'd copied in a photo of the HOA's empty compliance unit locker room. 3 vests, 2 radios, and uniforms with no municipal insignia. The post was concise, documented, and lacked venom. Facts are heavier than rhetoric. Replies came in trickles, then a flood. Some were skeptical. Karen's loyalists circling the wagons. Others were quiet thanks and relief. One neighbor, Greg, a middle school teacher, wrote, I got fined last summer for landscaping incongruity when my fence post leaned. They never offered a hearing. Another, Marissa, linked a scanned letter where she had paid a fine without a receipt because the board threatened to lien. Within 48 hours, the county clerk called. An investigative unit was opening a preliminary review. The registrar's office took the complaint seriously because, in the paper trail, there was a pattern. Decisions lacking signatures, fines without hearings, and now, a community protection unit that acted without authority. Karen saw the smoke and tried to fan it into a flame. She called Ethan a troublemaker in the forum and organized a special board meeting at the clubhouse to address community unrest. The email read like a grenade disguised as concern. It invited all residents, but specified a start time that favored her allies. An afternoon on a Tuesday when working people were at jobs and retirees might miss the change if they were out of town. Ethan RSVP'd. But he didn't intend to rely on turnout. He had requested, formally, via the bylaws, an agenda, minutes, and verification of quorum. The bylaws required a 30-day public notice for special actions that affected property rights. Karen's email had given 3 days. He printed another packet, bylaws pages, his complaint copy, witness statements, a list of residents who'd been fined without hearings. He put the deputy's business card in the folder as a promise more than a threat. He also slipped Ramirez a note, attend as a concerned citizen, and keep an eye. The clubhouse smelled of lemon cleaner and the faint musk of polyester theater. Karen stood behind a podium, her hair perfect, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a stack of papers that smelled like confidence. "Thank you for coming," she intoned. "We are here to ensure Oak Ridge remains our community." A smattering of neighbors filled the folding chairs. 2 retirees, a high school principal, the realtor who handled most listings, and a woman with a baby carrier who glanced around with suspicion. Ethan entered last, tall, sober, and unobtrusive. He took his seat near the back and watched. Karen launched into a performance about community values, safety, and the sanctity of the board's decisions. The room nodded politely, the way one nods at theater, recognition without assent. When Karen opened the floor, a man stood up, Greg, from the forum. "You fined me," he said quietly. "No hearing. No notice. I paid because I was scared of a lien." Karen's smile hardened. "You had the chance to address the board. You had the chance to follow your own bylaws," Ethan said, standing. His voice didn't shout. It landed. "You served me no certified notice. Your so-called community protection unit has no authority. We have copies of your procedures and statements from people you fined without hearing." Murmurs ate at the edges. Karen's mouth narrowed. "You're making accusations without proof." Ethan slid an envelope across the podium. Jenna had transcribed the minutes and highlighted quorum discrepancies. Nolan had printed spreadsheets. Ramirez, sitting in the crowd, rose calmly and identified himself as a county deputy responding to the initial call. "Folks," he said, "this matters with the county now. You should be careful making unilateral enforcement decisions." The room shifted like a field under wind. Karen's allies blinked. She pressed her lips together and reached for procedure. Bad theater for a leader used to a compliant audience. "This is slander," she spat. "We will pursue legal remedies." "You may try," Ethan said. "But our remedies involve county hearings where due process matters. Your actions are on record." As conversation broke into arguments and faces reddened, Ethan noticed Karen's expression change from fury to calculation. She'd underestimated the paper trail, the community's nerves, and the law's appetite for clarity. But she wasn't finished. People who crave control rarely are. Outside the clubhouse, under a cloudless late afternoon, Ethan felt the wind as if it were a judge's breath. The first act had ended. A public inquiry had opened. He had nobody's promises, only documents, witnesses, and a steady deputy who did his job. Karen would retaliate. She would escalate. But she had revealed her hand. Ethan folded his arms and watched the suburban tribunal begin to crack around the edges. He thought of leverage and light. He thought of law and neighborliness. He thought of the next move, quiet, precise, and utterly legal. There was a long road ahead. But for the first time since the vest showed up, the advantage had shifted. Paper beats posturing when you know which pages to turn. Oak Ridge woke up nervous. Not loud nervous. Not pitchforks and torches. More like the quiet buzz before a storm people pretend they don't see while they roll trash bins to the curb and water rose bushes. Cars drove slower past my ranch entrance. Folks who'd waved casually before now lingered, as if waiting to see if some HOA patrol unit would leap out from behind the hydrangeas and confiscate my mailbox. Karen's board had always operated in the shadows. Late fees slipped on doorsteps, threats sprinkled into newsletters, gossip weaponized like suburban artillery. Now light had cracked their shell. And like roaches, they scrambled to reassert control. I brewed coffee, fed my dog Scout, and checked the trail cameras mounted along the fence line. A habit from law enforcement days. Trust people, Sure, but verify quietly. 7:06 a.m. A golf cart pulled up. Not the wannabe tactical one. This one was white with faded vinyl seats and a sunshade top. The driver, lanky, nervous, holding a clipboard like a shield. I stepped outside before he could knock, not wanting another show for Mrs. Hargrove's binoculars. "Morning," I said. He jumped. Mr. Cole? I'm Chuck, board secretary." He didn't look like a man who loved rules. More like someone who'd once volunteered at a barbecue and woke up 3 years later drowning in meeting minutes and intimidation. "I'm here to deliver official notice." He swallowed. "The board is initiating a disciplinary review against you for conduct unbecoming of a community member. 4. For harassment of board officials and disruption of operations." So that was the counterpunch. Manufacture offense. Paint me as the aggressor. Pretend the documented truth didn't exist. I could have laughed. Instead, I took the envelope, weighed it in my hand. Like threats usually were. "Thanks," I said. "Got your copy?" He blinked. "Copy. HOA bylaws require you keep one on file for evidentiary chain." I kept my tone neutral. "And that service be logged in minutes with witness verification." His mouth opened and closed like a confused guppy. I'm not sure." "That's fine," I said gently. "You're doing your job, Chuck. No hard feelings." He exhaled in relief, then produced a shaky smile. "Karen said you'd yell." "Karen doesn't know me," I said. "But you should probably stop trusting people who assume conflict where there isn't any." He nodded, almost grateful, and hurried back to his golf cart like stepping off my property restored oxygen to his lungs. Scout huffed beside me. A border collie with judgmental eyes. She stared after him like she knew weakness when she saw it. "Yeah," I muttered. "They're scrambling." I went inside, opened the envelope with a knife, and read. Legal-sounding fluff, but no legal force. A hearing scheduled for Friday. Failure to appear constitutes admission of guilt. Cute. I filed it in a neat paper stack called Future Court Exhibits. The phone rang. Unknown number again. Caller ID didn't matter. Tone did. This one was syrupy sweet. "Mr. Cole," Karen purred. "I see our board has extended you official notice. Wise men comply. And wise leaders follow procedure," I answered. "Though I admire the creativity. Conduct unbecoming? That one's new. You attacked our integrity. I revealed your actions. You rallied a mob. I posted evidence. You're making enemies you don't need to make. And you're making mistakes you can't afford to make," I replied calmly. Silence. Cold, like tile in winter. "You think statutes protect you," she whispered. "But power isn't law, Mr. Cole. It's influence. It's perception. It's relationships." "Funny," I said. "I thought it was accountability." She scoffed. "Your military background has left you outdated. Civilians don't respond to brute legalism the way soldiers respond to orders. We govern by community culture." A laugh bubbled up. Soft, controlled. "You govern by fear. That's different." She ended the call without a goodbye. By noon, retaliation escalated. A landscaper I'd never hired pulled up with a truck bed full of sod and decorative stones. "Here to install the HOA-approved lawn renovation," the foreman said. "Invoice will be sent to your board liaison." A UPS driver dropped 3 certified envelopes addressed to me, violation notices for unauthorized fencing style, excessive natural growth on perimeter, and my favorite, property presentation incompatible with neighborhood aesthetic identity. They were throwing the book. Shame it wasn't the right book. Jenna, the paralegal neighbor, texted. "HOA is spamming residents with violation notices. Nolan thinks they're trying to show enforcement consistency for legal optics. We prepping response. You good?" I typed back. "They're panicking. Good sign. Come by at 5. Planning next step." At 3 o'clock, I played my whole card. I drove to the county courthouse. Filed a formal request for an injunction preventing the HOA from issuing fines or enforcement actions pending the county review. Attached all supporting docs. walked it to the clerk with the steady calm of a man who sharpened his axe long before chopping wood. She stamped it, slid it back, and said, "Your file's getting thick, Mr. Cole." Misused authority tends to create paperwork.
"And story time for the break room," she added with a wink.
"Whole office is following this saga." I tipped my hat. There's a moral coming. Back at the ranch, the driveway was full. My allies. Nolan pacing with a laptop bag. Jenna sorting files. Greg holding a clipboard like he'd found a calling.
Mrs. Hargrove with a thermos and binoculars. Never without them.
Court accepted the injunction motion, I told them. HOA can't enforce without risking sanctions. Nolan fist pumped like we'd won a basketball tournament in overtime. We spread papers over my dining table. Patterns emerged again. Tighter now. Late-night vote timestamps. Landscaping contracts awarded without bids. Emails where Karen scolded a neighbor for requesting financial disclosure. "This is bigger than a power trip," Jenna said softly. "She's running the HOA like a personal fiefdom." "Empire built on intimidation," I said. "And budget lines. We planned. We structured. We organized witness affidavits. Every step legal. Every move boring enough to devastate tyrants. Because bullies expect a fight. They forget that bureaucracy bites harder." At sunset, my trail cameras pinged motion. 2 HOA patrol vests again, same duo from before, walking the fence line with flashlights. This time they stayed outside. Testing boundaries. Waiting for a reaction. Hoping I'd make one wrong move they could weaponize. I stepped onto the porch. Hands in pockets. "You boys lost again?" I called. The tall one cleared his throat. "We are conducting perimeter assessment." "Of property you don't govern," I reminded. "Don't trespass again. I'd hate to see you charged twice." He stiffened. "We have authority to monitor community." "You have authority to leave when told," I said quietly. "Sheriff knows you're here. Cameras roll. Do the math." They walked off. Scout sat beside me, tail still, ears forward. Watching. Waiting. Loyal and alert. A reminder freedom always had sentries. The sun dipped orange behind the oaks, shadows long like stretched nerves. The HOA had declared war with paper swords. I'd answered with law. Round 3 belonged to neither side fully, yet. But as crickets began their evening chorus and porch lights flickered across the street, something settled in the air. They'd pushed. I hadn't budged. And the louder Karen tried to sound powerful, the more the neighborhood heard her desperation echo. I walked inside, closed the door, and locked it not out of fear but finality. Tomorrow, the board would learn the one lesson tyrants hate. Power isn't what you seize. It's what people stop surrendering. And Oak Ridge had just begun to stand. The meeting notice arrived before sunrise, bold font, too many exclamation points, and the kind of tone that tried to sound official but bled panic. Mandatory Community Emergency Hearing. HOA Authority Restoration. Today, 6 p.m. Clubhouse. Attendance required. Non-attendance implies support of disruption. Translation. Karen realized her grip was slipping and decided force and fear were her last allies. I stood on the porch, Scout lying at my feet, as the paper fluttered in my fingers like a white flag that refused to admit it was surrender. The air smelled like cedar and autumn dust. Peace sat heavy over the ranch, and yet, war buzzed under it like distant electric wires. My phone chimed. "Jenna. Emergency meeting? They're desperate. Be ready." Another from Nolan. "They'll try to bluff power, maybe shame or threaten residents. We coming prepared." I slid the phone into my pocket. "Looks like tonight's the finale, girl," I murmured to Scout. She leaned her head against my leg, tail thumping once. The canine version of I've seen enough humans to know when they're cornered. By noon, retaliation attempts escalated like fireworks someone lit inside a mailbox. A code violation sticker slapped on my truck windshield, torn off easily, but symbolic. A friendly reminder email blast claiming the HOA held legal authority to safeguard neighborhood values against rogue actors. A whisper campaign online, anonymous accounts calling me a bully, a militant, An outsider trying to undermine our community identity. Cute. They'd gone from ignoring my existence to trying to rewrite me as the villain. Problem was, truth had receipts. At 3 o'clock, Deputy Ramirez stopped by in his cruiser. He leaned on the hood, hands crossed, tired eyes amused. "You're living rent-free in the board's collective brain," he said. "Never rented space there to begin with." He smirked. "County investigator called me this morning. Financial audit coming. They want records, meeting minutes, budgets, fines, enforcement logs, emails." The domino line gleamed, ready to fall. "And they'll get them," I said. "Unless Karen tries to bury them first," he warned. "She won't get the chance." Ramirez studied me. "You sure you want to be there tonight?" "I want transparency. And she wants a stage. I'm giving her just enough rope to prove who tied the knots." He let out a quiet, knowing breath, the kind men exhale before they watch someone else's bad decisions catch fire. "You ever think of running for the HOA board after this?" I snorted. "I'd rather shovel manure." He laughed and drove off, leaving dust and the faint smell of victory in the distance. 5:55 p.m. The clubhouse parking lot overflowed. Pickup trucks next to luxury sedans, golf carts beside minivans. Neighbors milling, whispering, nervous energy crackling like static. I walked in with Jenna, Nolan, and Greg, not as an army, but as a ledger. Facts in folders. Witness affidavits. Copies of every rule they'd broken. No need to roar when paperwork roars louder. Inside, folding chairs stretched wall to wall. Karen stood at the podium like a queen mid-coup. Perfect hair. Anger disguised as poise. Her board flanking her like nervous heralds. The moment she saw me, her smile tightened like a wire pulled too far. "Mr. Cole," she said, voice sugar-coated venom, "thank you for joining us. We appreciate your willingness to face consequences for your disruption." "I'm here for transparency," I said. "Consequences usually follow the truth." A ripple through the room, quiet approval from people who'd spent years nodding while they swallowed resentment. Karen tapped the microphone, theatrically clearing her throat. "Neighbors, we are gathered because one resident has chosen to weaponize bureaucracy against us, threaten our community harmony, and undermine the authority that keeps Oak Ridge safe." Gasps from a few loyalists. Eye rolls from others. I lifted a hand. "I'd like to request the floor after the board speaks." Karen's jaw flexed. "You will be allowed 2 minutes. State law grants any member the right to speak reasonably on matters directly affecting them," Jenna cut in smoothly. "Silencing or limiting that voice in a disciplinary proceeding violates due process." Murmurs. Heads turning. People realized it wasn't just me. It was organized. Karen's nostrils flared. "Very well. We will proceed." She launched into a speech dripping with grandiosity, community integrity, rogue behavior, protecting property values, the kind of rhetoric meant to sound noble while tightening chains. Then she held up a document like a proclamation. "The board hereby votes to suspend Mr. Cole's privileges, impose fines, and require compliance training." Laughter, soft, incredulous, rippled across the room. I stepped forward. No notice. No hearing before a neutral committee. No evidence. "And for the record, I'm not under your jurisdiction." Karen's eyes sparked. "You live here." "I live within the county. My land predates the HOA. The exemption stands." I placed my folder on the podium with a quiet finality. "Now, let's talk about lawful authority." I distributed copies. To the audience, to the board, to Karen last. Inside. HOA bylaws highlighting due process violations. Copies of improperly issued fines across the neighborhood. Affidavits from over a dozen residents. Deputy report of unauthorized impersonation. County notice acknowledging investigation. Filing for injunction. Request for financial audit. Meeting minutes showing false quorum logs. The room inhaled as one. Karen's hand trembled only once, but it was enough. Her composure cracked like porcelain under heat. This is fabricated," she stammered. "No," Nolan said loudly. "That's your handwriting on fake quorum sheets." Jaws dropped. Karen's board members shifted like chairs were suddenly on fire beneath them. And these, Jenna added, holding up printouts, are emails where you approved fines without hearings. A neighbor shouted from the back, "You fined me for having a basketball hoop." Another, "You made us repaint our house twice." Another, "You threatened to tow my truck." The room turned. The temperature changed. Karen wasn't feared anymore. She was exposed. I met her eyes. Unshaken. Authority isn't something you declare. It's something you earn. And you lost yours the moment you chose power over people.
A voice called from the back. Ramirez, plain clothed, leaning on the doorframe.
"County auditor will be here Monday," he announced. "I suggest the board have clean books and a full record ready."
The room erupted. Murmurs, shock, a few claps.
Power shifting like earth plates. Karen paled. "You can't do this." "You already did it to yourself," I answered. Silence. Heavy and absolute.
Then a quiet voice near the front broke it. Mrs. Hargrove, steady as stone.
"I motion to remove the board," she said. Seconded. Thirded.
A wave of hands rose. Not angry, but resolved.
Karen choked. "This is illegal."
"No," I said, voice low, decisive.
"This is democracy." The vote was swift. Final. Clean.
Karen's guards, her patrol vest duo, hovered uselessly by the wall, suddenly aware they weren't enforcers but props. I stepped back, letting the community breathe.
Letting them finish what they had begun the moment fear cracked. The board was dissolved. And Karen,
she stood rigid, like someone who just heard chains rattle behind her but couldn't find the lock. Her gaze met mine, no longer superior, no longer smug.
Just scared. "Enjoy your evening," I told her quietly. "It's the last one where you get to pretend you run this place."
Then I walked out into the cool night, Scout trotting beside me, neighbors whispering with awe and relief. Justice didn't roar. It whispered. And tonight, Oak Ridge had finally listened.
Morning came slow and bright, as if the sun itself wanted to witness the cleanup. I brewed coffee on the porch while Scout sat at my feet, head on her paws, watching the road like she expected one last foolish visitor. The ranch felt lighter. Oak Ridge didn't hum with hidden tension anymore. It sighed. Pressure released, like a town after a long storm realizing the worst passed. I should have been celebrating. But people drunk on control don't surrender quietly. They lash out one last time. So I waited. Not with fear, with patience. At 8:14 a.m., a Lexus crept down the gravel like it didn't want to be seen. Navy blue, polished within an inch of vanity. It stopped where the drive met the road. Karen stepped out. Not flanked by her faux patrol. Not armed with clipboards, emails, or smug righteousness. Alone. She wore a cream cardigan like armor and sunglasses too large for sincerity. She clutched a manila envelope, tight, like if she didn't grip it, the world might tilt against her. Scout rose and stared, tail still. I eased her back with a hand, not because Karen was a threat, but because dogs understand wolves better than people do. Karen walked up the drive, shoes crunching gravel like fragile bones. Her confidence was gone. What replaced it was something brittle, pride broken into sharp edges. She stopped at the porch steps. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Karen." A beat passed. The kind where truth balances on a blade. "I brought something for you." She held out the envelope. "Final notice." "Not the usual kind?" I asked, voice mild. Her jaw twitched. "Consider it my resignation." I didn't take it yet. "You already lost the vote." "This isn't about the board," she said. She removed her sunglasses. For the first time since she'd marched her little suburban militia onto my land, I saw her eyes clearly. No performance. Just exhaustion. Fear. The sinking realization that the world she tried to build on intimidation had collapsed. "People turned on me," she said quietly. "They always loved the rules. They only loved the rules when I enforced them." "No," I corrected gently. "They tolerated the rules. Fear isn't loyalty. It's just debt." She swallowed. "I was trying to maintain standards. Communities need order. Without structure, everything falls apart." And with the wrong structure, everything rots. Her lip trembled, not in weakness, but in recognition. She stepped forward. You could have talked to me. I did, I said. From the first conversation. You mistook calm for weakness. A long silence. Then she held the envelope out again. My attorney drew this up. A cease of all HOA involvement in your property rights. It acknowledges your exemption, the misconduct, my resignation, and the audit? I asked. She exhaled. Shaky. They're coming Monday. I have nothing to hide. I raised a brow. Okay, she amended. I have some things to hide. But nothing criminal. Then you'll be fine, I said. Audit cleans house. Community resets. Good lesson. Good ending. Her voice hardened just an inch. And you? You get to stand taller than everyone? You get to be the hero. No, I replied. I get to live in peace. That's all I ever wanted. My voice wasn't louder than yours. It was just steady. That's the difference. She stared at me for a long moment, the look of a general who realized the war wasn't lost by might, but by arrogance. Do you think they'll forgive me? She whispered. Forgiveness isn't the milestone, I said. Learning is. She nodded once. Slow, like a verdict handed to herself. Then she placed the envelope on the porch and turned to leave. Halfway down the drive, she paused. For what it's worth, Ethan. I didn't hate you. I know, I said. You hated what you couldn't control. A bitter, almost appreciative laugh slipped out of her. And then she left. By noon, half the community stopped by. Not for gossip, not for panic, just gratitude. A retired army mechanic shook my hand. A mother with 2 kids in tow baked a casserole big enough to feed a platoon. Greg brought beer. Cheap, cold, honest. Mrs. Hargrove gave me a crocheted towel with "Due process lives here," stitched in cursive. Small-town justice comes with casseroles and embroidered sarcasm. Jenna and Nolan stayed back after the crowd thinned. You know, Nolan said, leaning on my porch railing, you could run for board president. I almost choked on my coffee. Absolutely not. Jenna laughed. You'd win in a landslide. I didn't do this to run anything, I said. I did it to stop being run. Power isn't always corrupt, she countered. Maybe not, I said, but I've met enough people who think holding the reins makes them a writer. We stood in comfortable silence. Birds sang. Lawns hummed. Peace returned like a stray dog that finally trusted the yard again. You know the difference between a tyrant and a leader? I asked. Nolan shrugged. A nicer business card? I smirked. A leader serves the people. A tyrant expects the people to serve them. Karen forgot which she was supposed to be. And you reminded everyone, Jenna said. No, I corrected softly. The law reminded her. I just turned the pages. They left soon after. Quiet victory doesn't need applause. Late evening. Sun dipping gold behind the pasture. I opened Karen's envelope at last. Inside. Official resignation letter. Legal acknowledgement of my property exemption. Signed withdrawal of all charges and notices. Personal handwritten note. Ethan, you were right. Power is borrowed, never owned. Thank you for returning the mirror. K. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a file labeled Resolved. Not victory. Closure. Scout trotted out beside me. I knelt and scratched behind her ears. We didn't beat them, I told her. We taught them. She wagged her tail once. Approval. The sky turned soft and warm. The first stars blinked awake. Oak Ridge exhaled peace it had forgotten it owned. And standing on my porch, boots planted, land quiet, rights intact, I felt what true justice feels like. Not triumph. Not vengeance. Balance. The system didn't break. It worked. Once someone insisted it did. I took a long breath, slow and content. A good man doesn't need control. Just space. Just respect. And when someone tries to take either, you don't shout. You don't swing. You stand. And the world remembers who it belongs to.